Welcome to Story Expo's Masters of Story Roundtable discussion with world-renowned story experts John Truby, Chris Vogler, David Freeman, Dara Marks, and Corey Mandell, and your host, Derek Christopher.
I said that very well. Thank you.
Thank you. You would agree?
Yes, I would. And I just would, as I put it, it's that you probably want to know where the bones are, but you don't want the audience to see the bones.
I mean, in the Matrix,
Yeah.
you have your Gandalf character. She's called the Oracle. But the reason we don't go, oh, she's the same as Gandalf in Lord of the Rings is because she bakes cookies. Mm-hmm. And because she has a very dry sense of humor. And she does other things that interrupt there's a thin line between an archetype and a stereotype. There are things that differentiate her from the archetype/stereotype enough that the audience never for a moment thinks, oh, she's an archetypal character. She might be, but at least our attention is not drawn to those aspects of her function in the story.
I'd say, too, that, you collect these things, these principles, these rules of thumb, these guidelines, and you sort of match them to your own personality and figure out, I can do that. That makes sense to me. That's something I can use. So you go through a period as a writer, gathering all those things and practicing with them. But then there's one kind of overriding principle for me, which is know all those principles and make sure you break them someplace.
Thank you.
Yeah, in every piece of work. And I could take that down to every scene and every line of dialogue. There should be some shiver of unexpected surprise in it, with playing all within all of these guidelines and rules, but make sure that you break the rules somehow.
You channel me very well.
Very good.
And Corey, I think you had something to...
Well, so my bias is working with writers and helping writers be able to do this. So that's where my bias is coming from. And I think that John says something really smart, which is we don't need to sympathize, we need to empathize with the character. I think that's a very smart way of putting it. But then the question is, how do you do that as a writer? And Chris, I thought, said something really smart about, identifying, relating to the character on screen. But again, how do you do that? And in working with writers, the way I would think about characters is, and I might disagree with some of you who were talking about Tony Soprano and Fleabag as like these despicable characters. Here's how I would look at it. So let's take Walter White. Okay, so he is in a really terrible jam, and he is just freaked out, and he needs money, and he does something really terrible in order to make money. I can totally relate to that. I have been in situations in my life where I was so scared about my security or my family's security that I have sometimes done stuff that I'm not proud of. I can relate to that. But I've never cooked crystal meth. I've never killed people.
Yeah.
And well, yes, okay, but shh. But I think that's the key. I think the key is we identify with Walter White, and he is us, but he's not us. Because if he is us, if I'm watching Fleabag and I'm like, that's me, that's very uncomfortable. Now, if I'm watching Fleabag and I'm like, I don't relate at all to her, that's boring. So Fleabag, when she's in emotional pain, she disengages and she disassociates and she has self-sabotaging behavior. Can I relate to that? Absolutely. Has my behavior killed my best friend? No. So I watch that and I'm like, I'm her and I'm not her. It's that paradox. I'm her and I'm not her. So what I find is helpful with writers, and this is for those of you that struggle with story structure, this is something that you might want to play with, because I've worked with a lot of writers who follow the paradigms and the rules and try to impose the plot, and they don't have any success. And what you can do is, so you take your character and you start with yourself in terms of like what your great pain is, what you're struggling with in life. And you heighten it. You heighten it to the place that is way beyond anything you would do. But it's coming from like a real pain, like whatever you're struggling with, whatever your insecurity or whatever it is in life that you're struggling with. You start there. But then you heighten it to a place that you would never go to. And that is how you can find your story. And that's how a lot of showrunners work, is they'll start from what it is that they are personally struggling with. And then they will heighten it to a place that, again, is way beyond what they would do. And that gives you the main sort of tentpole plot, and then you can just write from there. And that's a great way of doing integration. So that's a great way of ending up with something where, I mean, Shakespeare started this when he was writing his plays, like, Hamlet. Because think about Shakespeare for a second. There had never been plays before. There was no such thing as a proscenium art. So he has all these people standing there who'd never seen a play, and it's in broad daylight. And now the actors are going to come on stage. And if the people standing there are not interested, they're going to get on stage and probably kill these people. It was very rough crowd. And he has to get their attention. And Shakespeare uses the same technique in all of his plays, which is, think about Hamlet. So everyone who is standing there can relate to a screwed up family and, parents who aren't necessarily faithful. But an uncle who murders the father to sleep with the mother, now that is friggin' crazy.
Wait a minute, I thought that was the relatable part.
So the point is, if you look at all of his characters, everyone who's watching it, they can relate to the character, but yet that character is not them, because that character is such a heightened representation of them. So it's a really cool way to create story structure where you start with yourself, it leads you to character, which leads you to story.
Is there a voyeuristic nature to TV and film? Like if you see an accident, you go, oh, I want to watch the accident.
Yeah.
Is it the same thing with Walter White? You're like, oh shit, I'm so glad I'm not that guy, but I can't wait to see what he does next.
But here's the thing, you are that guy and you're not that guy. That's what makes that show, that's what makes Fleabag successful.
And that's why we tune in.
Yeah,
because we want to see
if it's not us and it's a train wreck, I could see that in the world. I could tune on CNN and see a train wreck. The whole world's a train wreck. I don't care about that.
I'm going to translate this into Freemanese.
Oh boy.
Which is I'm going to talk about getting there through external means, which is, of course, not what I love what you're doing. This is just another approach. I mentioned that I know 89 ways to make an audience identify with the character. One of them would be, let's say, the character is forced by circumstances to violate their own integrity for the greater good, but they suffer. And I could give you example after example from movies, and I'm not going to do that. Maybe on stage, I'll do that, at our Expo. But you give the character a number of these empathy techniques. Walter White's perfect. He is has so much undeserved misfortune, which is technique number one. Put the hero in danger is number two. These are the most obvious ones. He has so much unfairness, injustice, undeserved misfortune, and for his kid too. And let alone and then you just pile on. He has, he's going to die. That's not very fair, is it? And all of these things cause us to identify with him. So these are all empathy techniques working on a subconscious level. And then you just flips anything upside down. Oh, and he also makes crystal meth and, kills people and blah, 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 blah. You have some empathy techniques, some upside down empathy techniques that makes some things that make him identifiable, some not. We have a flawed hero. And all these techniques are working on a subconscious level. Now, it doesn't do the deep internal plumbing, roto-rootering that your process does and that your process does. But if you have to create lots of movies and lots of TV shows and lots of characters, it's a workable way to guarantee that the audience will identify with the characters to the extent that you want them to. It's just a different approach. It doesn't involve the deep psychological work, but it's repeatable. We talked about, we all have our favorite one-hit wonders in Hollywood. Oh my God, I wish that writer had done it again. They did it here in this series and they never did it again. And it grieves us because we wanted to see more of their magic.
But the challenge with that is it tends to create generic scripts, generic characters, and the industry's moving away from that. It's not interesting.
When I was teaching writing for Disney and Fox, the hardest part was getting people just to have imagination. I had to create so many exercises. Like, I have them write, I got this from Richard Curtis, who wrote Four Weddings and a Funeral. I'd have them write the same scene like 4 or 6 times and complete, and then that was a waste of time. So then I would just have them brainstorm the same scene 4 or 6 times, and I wouldn't even allow them to write until I heard all 6 versions.
But the thing is, you don't need imagination. You know, if someone has been in love and suffered loss, and someone that they love is no longer in their lives, and they've strived, everything they need is inside them if they know how to access it and use it. What's important is to write a script that this is what, whenever I bring agents into my UCLA class, this is what they always say. You have to write a script that no one else could have written. So that doesn't mean starting with lists or rules necessarily. It means starting inside you and what is unique about you, because you have to write a script to stand out, to get anyone to want to invest in you or give you a chance. You're going to have to write something that no one else could have written.
Well, I feel I've treated you unfairly because I've disagreed with everyone else, and I feel this time I have to disagree with you.
I've been waiting for it. Bring it on.
Okay, so for those of you who saw Jerry Maguire, maybe everybody's favorite scene is Jerry and Dorothy have spent the night together. That's Renee Zellweger and Tom Cruise. Bonnie Hunt, who hates men, gave depth to her character in the scene before where she's hearing Dorothy and Jerry having a good time frolicking, and she's crying because she doesn't, as much as she hates men, she kind of wishes she was Dorothy at that moment, just giving a little bit of another side to her personality. In any case, Jerry in the morning, a very loud alarm clock wakes him up. He steps into the hall just in time to hear Dorothy say to her sister, well, here's a little secret for you. I love him. I love him. I do. I love him for the man he almost is, and I love him for the man he wants to be. Something like this. And of course, this is her worst nightmare, to know, and then she hears her son Ray go, hi, Jerry, and she knows that Jerry just overheard that. And then it's high anxiety as he walks into the kitchen, and she's wondering how he's going to react to hearing her outburst. I love him for the man he almost is. And of course, he's very casual and cool with it, but it takes her for a while to believe it. There is so much I mean, I don't know what your internal experience is with love or dating or blah, 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 blah. But I look at a scene like this and I just go, imagination, imagination, imagination. And I go...
But isn't that just another word for creativity?
Well,
he's doing a romantic comedy different than other people
no,
have
but
been doing
I'm just saying that
that's easy to say and very difficult to do.
No, I'm not. I'm agreeing with you. I'm just saying no amount of interiority, no amount of internal experience with love or dating that I've ever had would have made me come up with something that creative. I'm just saying imagination. Every 20 seconds.
How do you think Cameron works? I mean, how do you think these writers... I think what you're doing very smartly
is agreeing with you.
No, is you keep like explaining the product, but what I'm trying to get is how do people create it? And that's how these writers create it. It comes from them. It comes from inside them, and they create something that only they could have created.
But where I've got to, I don't know if disagree is the right word, but where I would extend it a little bit, yeah, you need to go from that personal place. Yeah. But my point is that if you do not know that you are writing a romantic comedy and what those beats are, like if you don't have a first kiss in a romantic comedy, you do not have a romantic comedy. And your audience will hate you.
Oh,
wait. Let me finish the point. The point is, these beats are there. These beats are there, and that's what makes all together, the sequence of them makes that form. And so my point is, I was talking about the 3 rules, and normally I hate to use the word rules because one of the biggest cliches I've ever heard that drives me nuts is that you see on these Facebook boards, and they say, oh, you got to learn the rules to break the rules. As though breaking the rules, if that's all you do, you're going to have a well-written script. That's nonsense. It's total nonsense. My point is that you do have to write something that is totally unique. The agents are absolutely right about that. The question is, how do you do it?
Right.
And you start from a place that is internal and creative, but I'm saying that has got to work through the process of knowing what these beats are in your forms and then transcending the form. To go back to Walter White, this is one of the most revolutionary TV shows in history. One reason for it is that the premise, which he pitched as I want to take this guy from Mr. Chips to Scarface. I want to go from Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde. He had a complete character arc over the entire show. Most shows had never been done that way because they were designed to go forever. Well, you look at Walter White, this is a guy, and this goes off in a lot of what you're saying, which is we identify with him because it took the main character in a crime story, it's a transcendent crime story, took the main character, who is normally a criminal, made him an everyman. And then slowly but surely they twisted the moral straitjacket and put him under greater and greater pressure. And one of the writers on the show said, and this is a perfect example of technique that writers on television and writer staffs know because they are the best at story technique of any writers I have ever encountered. He said, there was a point where we had to take Walter from doing things for the right reasons, he's trying to help his family because he's dying of cancer, to he goes too far. And once he falls off the moral cliff, which happens when he lets the woman aspirate, and he doesn't save her, that's when Walter White moves into Mr. Hyde.
I want to respond. So I want to start by saying I have nothing but genuine respect for you, for your intelligence, and for the work that you've done. We start in the same place, but we are opposite in where we very much disagree on where you go from there. And what I would say is, I think there's a right way and a wrong way. And I think the right way is whatever allows the writer to get to where they're going. And I think that there's different paths. And I think that for some people, the path that you outline is going to allow them to get to the promised land. I'm just going to articulate a different path, not a better path, just a different path. So what I would say is, once you start from that internal place, don't think about genre. Again, just a different path. Don't think about the beats. Don't let the beats tell you what to do. Let the characters tell you what to do. Let the characters lead you to the story. And I think that a big reason why nobody watches romantic comedies anymore is that everyone started following the same beats, and it's the same story.
It's always been the case with romantic comedy. Always.
But Fleabag, second season, is beautiful. It doesn't follow, and it is all character-led, and it is unique. And you look at The Bear. I mean, that is where romantic comedies have gone. They've moved away. So all I'm saying is, and I think this is the great thing about The Weekend, and I think it's really smart about what you're doing, is everyone here is on the same team. We all want stronger stories. We want to help empower writers to become the best storytellers they can be and have the best possible chance of the best possible career. We all want that. And we all, I think, are going to be teaching different paths. And I think that's great because, a writer may come and what Chris is talking about and his path might really be the thing that unlocks it to where they're going to go. And the same is for everyone. But I'll just say, and I think this is the cool thing about The Weekend, is that we're going to just completely contradict each other. And I'm going to tell writers, don't do it that way, do it this way. And you're going to tell writers, no. And I think the great thing is you get to come, and we're not just making this stuff up. We've been doing this for a long time. We've worked with a lot of very successful writers. Our opinions are very informed. And I think that's the great thing about This Weekend, is that everyone can come and they can get all these different perspectives. There's a great Hindu saying that we all want to get to, let's say, God or divinity or to our better selves. And they say there's a mountain, and that's on top of the mountain, and we're in the valley. And we want to get there. We want to get to our better selves, our better angels, to divinity, whatever it is we're going. And there's different paths up the mountain, but there are false paths. False paths don't get you to the top of the mountain, but there are more than one real path that take you to the top of the mountain. And they're different. Some paths are very steep and you get there quick, but it's very strenuous. Some are slower and more gentler. And different people are born to different paths, but no path is better than a different path. That's why the Hindus have never, well, we don't need to get into that. But I think that's true of storytelling. And I think that there's different paths to get there. And I think it's really awesome that you're going to have a week, or you've assembled a weekend where people are going to be talking about different paths, and then the people who attend are going to have...
I have to interject one thing that has nothing to do with paths, stories, and approaches. This is not related to anything that anyone has actually said here, which is quite often an actor, director, an agent won't read past the writer's first 3 pages. And if they read the first three pages, maybe they'll go on to the first 5 or 6 pages. And if they like those, maybe they'll go on to page 10 or 12. And it's going to be a while before they decide, I want to read this entire script. So long before your beats kick in, and long before the internal voice of whatever passion is driving the lead character kicks in, there's just a level of craftsmanship and imagination and surprise that has to be there, because you have to hook the agent, the director, the producer so many times in those first 3, first 5, first 10 pages, just show how clever, maybe might be the word, just how out of the box you are, how surprising you are, and still have some emotional moments that let people know that you're firmly operating with all cylinders firing emotionally, creatively, etc.
But as Corey said, I mean, you said better, you wrapped it up better than I could. I mean, that's the great thing about this weekend, is to have so much experience from so many different points of view. You don't have to agree with one person. You don't have to agree with anybody.
Right.
But if it sparks something in you,
Right.
then that's the whole point of it. And that's why I think that this event draws such professional writers from around the world, because they know the value of the education that they're going to take away from this weekend.
And I think everybody sort of has the responsibility. The people attending have the responsibility to listen, take what makes sense to you, what works for you, and then create your own system.
Yeah.
You know, that don't follow. The last thing you want to do is follow with any kind of precision or
Amen.
Amen. Total commitment. I'm going to go down this road and I'm going to check all these
You got to find your path.
Absolutely.
Amen.
Yeah. Yeah. And you'll take, cherry pick from all the others that make sense to you. Yeah. And thank God you have so many options that are all reflections of a reality. But ultimately, you're the maker.
And I think people will be surprised at how complementary they are. In other words, I think if you look at each of these approaches very carefully, you'll see that there are not many places where they're contradictory. I don't think what we are saying is contradictory at all. We're just talking about a point of the process that we work through. But I think that the trick is to take what you find works for you, but also listen to everybody and see if there's a synthesis that you can create in your own storytelling process that gives you the best story you can write. That's what this weekend's going to be all about.
Yeah, I'm so happy when somebody listens to me and I have my language and I have my points and I have my order I present them in, and they dive into it and start changing it all around, and I'm not offended by that or worried about that. It's like, good, now you got it.
And with that, thank you, Chris Vogler, Dara Marks, Corey Mandell, David Freeman, John Truby. We will see you guys in September for Story Expo's Masters of Story, and thank you guys again. This is great.
Thank you for watching Story Expo's Masters of Story Roundtable discussions.